CSS is a vast and rich resource for web development that can seem unyielding and difficult to understand. This video will boil it down, and by the end of it, you will have made a simple website header. This is CSS in 3 minutes. Let's begin. CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets, is a framework that we use to add styles and designs to HTML. HTML elements have properties, and with CSS, you can define rules to manipulate said properties. Now, what do I mean by HTML elements have properties? Take for example, this div. It will look like this on the browser. It will have some width and some height. It can have border if you want. You can define what the border should look like. You can also define what font to use, like this. This is barely scratching the surface. There are heap tons of other properties. CSS is where you design the rules for these properties to follow. Now, let's come to our favorite part, syntax. CSS follows a simple format. Write the name of what you want to CSS, followed by curly brackets. Inside of those curly brackets is where you set the properties. These properties are called rules. Always remember to end each rule with a semicolon. Take for example, this div on the right. I want it to follow these rules on the left. It will look like this in the browser. If I add another div with something written inside of it as well, your browser will now render this. If I change the second div to a bold tag instead, it will look like this, because we defined rules for our div tag to follow, not the bold tag. This has been CSS in 3 minutes. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. Also, subscribe. In the next section of this video, we will be using what we have learned up till now to make a simple but effective header for a website. We will use simple HTML and CSS to construct this header. Stay tuned if you want to see that. From here on out, nothing you see will be scripted or edited. I might not talk much at times, but I will try to explain everything as much as I can. The errors I make will be there for you to see, so that if you make them as well, you can learn how to fix them. On the left side you will see my code, and on the right side you will see my output. To get started, make an index.html file and save it somewhere. Inside that HTML document, press exclamation and press enter. This will create you a boilerplate code. Inside this code, whatever you write will be taken as is. This is what the output looks like. It's going to be a blank document. First thing you can do to test out if it's working is change the title tag's value, and you'll see the output appear up here. Since we are making a header, let's create a div with the class of header. Inside this header, we will have a title and a subject. Let's give the title some value, and same with the subject. If you save this, it will appear all the way over here in the corner. And with a header, we also need a navbar, so create that as well. Inside the navbar, we will have some options, so create divs with options inside them. I'll make 3 with values op1, op2, and op3. They should appear up here as well. That is basically all we need for our HTML. To get started with CSS, go to your head tag and put in a style tag inside of it. And everything you write inside this style tag is going to work out as CSS. So to get started, let's style the body. Firstly, put body into your style tag followed by curly brackets. Inside of this, you can define anything you want. I want my whole document to follow the Arial font style. My body width needs to be 100% of whatever the screen is. So I can do that by defining the width as 100 VW, which stands for viewport width. And the same goes with height, 100 VH. I also want my body to have a dark background. So I can do background color, RGB, 32, 32, 32. If I save this, my background will become dark. Now, my body in general would have a default margin set, and I don't like it on my code. So what I will do is set it to 0, and that should bring me to this. I also want everything inside of my body to have a color of white. This way, every text piece will turn into white. Now let's come to our header. To call a class into your CSS, you use dot and whatever the class name is. For now, I want my header to have a width of 100% and a background color of RGB 22, 22, 22. If you save that, you will see that everything that was inside my header is now in a darker place. I also want everything in there to be padded by 1 EM. It's just a unit, so try not to get scared for it with it, by it. Now to access the title class inside that is inside of my header, you can do dot header and the greater than sign and then dot title. You can do normally dot title and that will work as well, but it's better to do this if you want a direct hit instead of applying the style to every title tag there is. So I want the title to have a the font size of 32 pixels. Hmm. HEADER. If you haven't noticed, my styles aren't applying properly. Let's see what's wrong. Okay, so this is where you use debugging tools. So if you right click and select inspect, you'll be able to open your developer tools. And inside of the developer tools, if you go to body and look for your header, you can see your style tag over here. Your title tag over here. If you click that and go down here, you'll be able to see all the things that have been applied to it. Now, for some reason, my body is not applying the Arial font to everything. So let's figure that out. Okay, so font style doesn't do much. You should do font family instead. And that worked. Now let's see why the size isn't working. Okay, so the size isn't working because this is also turned into font style. It needs to be font size. That should do the trick. Now that that's done, let's go to the subject. So call it by saying dot header greater than sign dot subject with font size as 30 pixels. That looks good. I also want my subject to be on the right side, so I could do that with text align right, and it'll send the subject all the way to the right. Let's see. Okay, so let's put the title back to the center as well. Okay. Now, since we're done basically with what we need in the header, let's come to the nav bar. In this, if you do width 100% and background color as again RGB 32, 32, 32. Alright, 22, 22, 22. It'll look as though it's a part of the header. Now inside this we have OP, so let's call those dot nav dash bar dot OP, and let's give them some styles like font size of 22 pixels. Yeah, that looks nice. And then let's also make them all come in one line by saying display in line. Now I want them to be equally spaced. This is a little tricky to do or understand, but what you do is you turn the navbar or the container style of display to flex, and then you justify the content as space evenly. With this, now you have your basic setup ready. But if you notice, there's a little bit of space right here. Let's figure out why that is happening. So go back to your inspect, go to navbar, and as you can see, the navbar is not going full place. So the problem with this is that we provided the header with some padding, and if we get rid of that, it'll all fit into the screen. Okay, so now that that's done, let's add that hover style to it. So write dot navbar greater than dot op, do this and hover. Now every time you hover, you want something to happen. I want the background color to go to orange. If you save this, this is also not working. Let's see what's wrong. Oh, it is actually working, but the deal with it is it's not like fully spaced. So if you do width equals 100% for the OP, and then text align center, that should make our div do this. Now, I want it to be a seamless transition instead of a blocky one, so I'll do transition of 0.2 seconds. And now if I come in, it becomes very diluted. I also want to add a little box shadow to my navbar so that it looks like it's popping up. So you can do that by writing box shadow. The X offset I'll set to 0, Y offset to 4 pixels. I want the radius to be 8 pixels and thickness to be 0, and the color to be 32, 32, 32. Or maybe just RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.8. If I set that, you'll see the box shadow appear. Now you can adjust any value over here the way you want it. I'm going with stuff that I like. I also want a border on the top to separate between the heading and the navbar. I can write border top to do that. The value that goes in here is the width, which is 1 pixel, the type, which would be solid, and the color, which I'd like white. And now what I can do is add a little bit of padding to the OPs instead, but the way I want it is for it to have padding only up and down and not left and right. So what you do is you write 1 EM and 0. The first value tells up and down, and the second value tells left and right. If you do that, now you have a working header. That will be all for this video. Subscribe and like if you have no friends,